One of the most important details that will be present in Vanguard is the rule of the Old Ones. Prior to the Forsaken, the Dark Aether was a much more primitive place akin to the medieval times, with hundreds of kingdoms constantly at war since the beginning of time. Except in the Dark Aether, instead of kings and kingdoms, you have elder gods and tribes. Visually, it was a lot more demonic and hell-like in nature with a rich red aesthetic. For a long time, Cortifex the Deathless, the mightiest lord of the Dark Aether, had managed to exert considerable control over the Dark Aether, although unlike Zykov, who absorbed everything in his path, Cortifex seemingly made alliances and political moves with or against the rival Old Ones, slowly gaining control. Cortifex launched the Nether Wars against his rivals and eventually started losing allies, though, which caused some of his loyals to switch sides to a resistance that was forming against him. The resistance beat him back and took over the throne. The four Old Ones that have it out for him are Nauticus the Conqueror, the most acclaimed general who once led Cortifex's armies in the Dark Aether. Now they are sworn enemies. Sarakix the Shadow, who is a wicked trickster who sees humans as playthings. Invicta the Destroyer, who is the ultimate frontline fighter, at home in the thick of battle and always out for blood. And Belikar the Warlock, who is a master of Dark Aether rune magic, fascinated by humans and their warlike ways. Now Cortifex wants revenge against them. Luckily for him, he now has an ace up his sleeve. An important plot point about Vanguard that Trekkov explicitly told us is that the beings of the Dark Aether have had contact with humans for a very long time and influenced ancient human culture, as we see by the carvings everywhere from Egypt to Mexico and many more. Sarakix mentions the day they discovered humanity, and the events that led to that are quite interesting. She says that one day the mystery box, the Pack-a-Punch, and other mysterious artifacts began appearing in the Dark Aether, and this was the factor that led to them realizing there was more to reality than just the Dark Aether. Sarakix, as well as the other demons, began to watch and interact with humanity after discovering the outside world. Her earliest observations were of humans before they had discovered agriculture, which puts the date at around 9500 BC. This allows us to extrapolate something important. The universe of Vanguard and Cold War was seemingly created during Tag der Toten, but Samantha and Eddie did not reappear in the timeline until the 1960s. This gives the Dark Aether demons plenty of time to interact with humanity before the events of our story, and does kind of imply that many Elder Gods may have existed within the Dark Aether prior to the new universe being created. Our understanding of the Dark Aether was previously very limited, with us just having an idea of the Apothecans and Keepers battling it out, with the Apothecans being banished in there. But the Dark Aether is way more complex than that, and there's a bunch of beings in there that we are finally starting to learn about. After interacting through various mystical means like fires, hallucinations, and worship, the Dark Aether entities begin to crave a way to better view and interact with our world, as they could not enter it in the physical form. As a solution, they would invent artifacts, a means of placing your essence inside an object and sending it into the real world. Essentially a genie trapped in a bottle. When someone makes a covenant with them via these artifacts, they can speak to and see through this person. Sarakix, Belikar, Invicta, Nauticus, and Cortifex all create artifacts. They each attempt to mimic the cultures of the people they had been interacting with, except Cortifex, who simply stuck to pyramids on a stick. Invicta, for example, granted his sword to the ancient Greeks, who initially viewed him as the god of war, Ares. After bonding with the Greek hero Achilles and helping him in the siege of Troy, their two legends became inseparable, and Invicta would later be believed to be the spirit of Achilles himself. Sarakix, meanwhile, took a particular interest in the Japanese people, with them believing her to be Kitsune, a mischievous fox spirit. Nauticus was believed by the ancient Norse to be the Ymir, the father of the frost giants. Belikar appeared to the ancient Maya of Central America, and Cortifex cultivated worship from the ancient Egyptians, likely being associated with Osiris, the god of death and resurrection. At some point after the early 1800s, but before the First World War, it seems like the connection was severed. The reasoning behind this is Sarakix telling us of interacting with humans during the late Edo period, but Von List having to teach Cortifex of World War I, which means by 1914 they had no access to our world. This leads to the artifacts becoming dormant and the influence on the human world ceasing. That is, up until Project Endstation breaches the dimensional veil. In 1944, the moment this happens, the artifacts activate once again. Unfortunately, they are in the possession of SS Oberfuhrer Wolfram von List. List, the great uncle of Jaeger. Von List leads a division called Die Wahrheit, who scoured the world searching for mystical artifacts of unconventional power in order to gain a strategic advantage over the Allies, and enabled through Reich Führer Heinrich Himmler's obsession with the occult. They search for items that appear only in myths and legend, forcing scholars and academics to help them, such as Thor's hammer, the Holy Grail, Shangri-La, and Atlantis itself. When the artifacts activated, Von List bonded with Kortifex, who gave him the power to raise the dead. This is likely in exchange for some greater goal that we are currently unaware of. A demonologist, Professor Gabriel Kraft, was also forced to work with the Battalion. It was Kraft's knowledge of the occult that led Von List to the artifacts. The backstory for this is, prior in 1939, Von List arrived unannounced at Leipzig University, Germany, and met with a professor of demonology that I just mentioned, Gabriel Kraft. Von List told Kraft he had to tender his resignation immediately, pack a suitcase, and go with Von List as an advisor on an overseas Die Wahrheit expedition. After Kraft laughed at the ludicrous suggestion, Von List showed he was deadly serious, took his gun from his belt, and killed Kraft's assistant. Then, Von List had Kraft thrown in an SS prison with a dozen other experts who had similarly been recruited from universities and museums. The officer arrived and informed the explorers, historians, and archaeologists that they will find the artifacts they were searching for, despite the fact that they all knew these were objects of legend, not fact. Kraft latched out, saying he knew what the Nazis were doing as he'd seen his friends dragged off to camps. Von List simply smiled, and instead of shooting Kraft, he sent the men to the professor's home and had his spouse taken to an interrogation cell. Now, should Kraft refuse, it wasn't he who'd suffer the consequences, but the love of his life. Knowing he had to now follow the orders of Von List, Kraft made a silent promise that he would somehow, someday, destroy Die Wahrheit from within. Jumping back to where we were, after Von List bonded with Kortifex, allowing Von List to act as Kortifex's physical body, he returned to the city of Stalingrad and used his new power to raise an army of zombies in service to the Third Reich due to him being angry at the Nazis losing Stalingrad. His goal is to raise the millions who died on the Eastern Front, yet Kortifex isn't strong enough to fully do so yet. Kraft sent a distress call to the Allied Special Forces to help save himself, as Von List has locked him into an area, who was soon deployed in the city. However, they became trapped in a containment spell by Kortifex and were forced to face Von List's undead army. The spell acts as an EMP that stops them from calling for help. Somehow, the Special Forces become bonded with the core four gods. Von List is in a rush to turn the tide of the war, however time is running out for the Nazis. The Allies are preparing to retake Europe, and this is putting a lot of stress on him because his million undead army isn't ready yet. On the other hand, Nauticus is contemplating how he got there. Once being a general, the commander of the Knight Legions, he was someone to fear. Yet now he's just stuck to a human. He just wants to get back to the Dark Ether. Belikar believes World War II is the biggest event in human history and thinks that it's her duty to help us. Sarakix is intrigued at the idea of helping us, whilst Invicta is very angry at the idea of it. Within Stalingrad, several portals appear, leading to other places trapped in the spell, such as Paris and Normandy in France, and an army camp in Japanese territory, Shinonuma. The artifacts would help the Allied Special Forces bond with the aforementioned other old ones who had it out for Kortifex, and with their help they will eventually overthrow Kortifex. Despite the entities helping us, they are not friendly and simply aided in an attempt to overthrow him. The most important thing to discuss from Vanguard at this current moment in time that's relevant to the future of the sequel to Cold War Zombies' storyline is the Societe Occult. Whilst we've only begun to get information about this mysterious group, we know a few important facts already. The organization has existed at least since the medieval times and still exists by the time of Vanguard Zombies. The Societe are a group of rich and powerful people who know of the Dark Ether and have used its dark magic to gain power many times throughout history, spending years meeting different Dark Ether entities and learning from them. They wrote all of their knowledge of rune magic in the Tomb of Rituals in order to enhance the abilities of the Dark Ether artifacts. They used to meet constantly in different places, using ever-changing hideouts, until one day an artifact and Freemason named Lucien Porrit, a high-ranking member of the Societe, constructed the Hotel Royale in Paris. He had specific designs for the hotel and built it on top of catacombs that were lined with bodies. And these catacombs were in the shape of a giant Dark Ether rune. We learn that areas of mass death/casualty cause weak points between the regular universe and the Dark Dark Ether. Considering that the Nak'Daron bunker keeps appearing throughout zombies, and just so happens to be the spot of the first breach in the dimensional veil, it really makes you wonder just what exactly happened at this site to create such dimensional fragility. After this, there is a large amount of unknown, until the 1920s when something happens that shakes the Societe Occult so badly they split the Tomb of Rituals into individual pages, and each member takes a page into hiding. It is here they remain until Dr. Kraft stumbles upon a page working for Von List, and Kraft would soon betray him and relay this information to the Special Forces as well. And now, with both sides aware of the Tomb of Rituals and the power these pages will hold, the race is on, but mysteriously, Von List redirects forces to Egypt and says their mission is critical to protecting Kortifex and is thus the highest priority for Die Wahrheit. This seems strange considering how important the hunt for the rest of the pages of the tomb should be. What we can say is likely is that Kortifex is defeated by the end of the game. The Tomb of Rituals will be reassembled and Egypt will likely be a map location. It seems not only that Kortifex is defeated, but that he's also absorbed by Zykov. What's very interesting about this, however, is that one of the oldest Zykov journal entries we received was him finding a dead corpse of an elder god. Knowing what we know now, he likely absorbed it after he found it. It could be that this was in fact Kortifex and that he was Zykov's first absorption. Something off topic but related is that Kortifex seemingly implies that he wasn't even born on Earth, leading the possibilities for the future of the Dark Ether storyline to be practically infinite. We learn that Zykov was the very first human to live long enough to become an elder god. Due to Zykov consuming all of the old ones and their powers, this is why he was able to use their powers against us in his final moments, and likely was able to raise the dead thanks to the consumption of Kortifex. The Societe Occult also presents an interesting theory for the future. Could they be the people that the director, Eddie Richtofen, is working on his Project Janus with? And since Requiem archives seem to have tons of information and artifacts from the Vanguard zombie story, could Eddie be in possession of the Tomb of Rituals? Only time will tell. For now, we are left to wait on the rest of Vanguard season to finish out this story, but we can ponder the implications of what we've learned so far. We know that Der Anfang's main quest, yet to release, will see the introduction of an unexpected ally that will help us in defeating Kortifex. Could this be Spragmus, the devoted follower of the Old Ones? From a purely gameplay perspective, this would also make a lot of sense, as it would allow a lore reason for a new wonder weapon from the Dark Ether to be introduced. Just like the Chrysalax, or maybe this person will be someone else, such as Reznov, considering we are in Stalingrad after all. In terms of the perks in Vanguard Zombies, they follow a non-traditional system in this game, and are demon blood, or to be more realistic, the blood of entities within the Dark Ether. It is implied that when consumed, this blood becomes a part of the Special Forces team. If we think about this from the scientific perspective we get in Cold War, this is no different to developing powers from Ethereum exposure on a large scale like we see with Sam, but on a smaller scale the exact same thing happens when we drink perks in Cold War. So by drinking the Dark Ether entities' blood that have been exposed to mass exposure from being in the Dark Ether for so long and becoming powerful, we are able to use their abilities. Yet more interesting new information about the Pack-a-Punch is that the entities are unaware of who made it. Invictor says whoever it was, they must have been a genius at the forge. Maybe a reference to Jeb Brown, the machine's original creator. Invictor specifically also gives us two pieces of information which are quite shocking given everything we know so far. The first piece is that he says he has seen such crucibles like this in the Dark Ether, and that they use powerful magic, implying that in this new world without Element 115, the method of upgrading weapons uses some sort of Dark Ether rune magic, and that other beings in the Dark Ether have been doing it for a while. So in the prior Etherverse, this Dark Ether rune magic was probably a thing then too. At the end of Vanguard's campaign, Task Force Vanguard is set up. Lucas finds a document mentioning Project Nova, one of the most infamous plot devices in Call of Duty history, introduced in Black Ops 1. And it was a toxic gas that violently killed anyone who came in contact with it. Sleeper agents were put inside each US state capital and programmed to release Novus's gas once they heard a series of numbers, but Alex Mason and Jason Hudson managed to stop it. Paulina also finds a file regarding Project Ether, noting it mentions something about reviving the dead. This is likely just an umbrella term for what Von List is up to. A character in Vanguard is Lewis Howard and is voiced by Marcus Howard. Lewis Howard is actually related to Marcus Howard from Call of Duty World War II, Sledgehammer Games' previous game, and they are both voice acted by Russell Richardson, who also plays Cormac in Advanced Warfare. warfare. The thing is though, they are apparently brothers in the canon, so World War II is somehow canon to Vanguard, but we are not exactly sure how much because obviously a lot of canon kind of contradicts itself, but they are probably going to have to retcon a lot of stuff from Call of Duty World War II to make sense in Vanguard, especially because we had World War II zombies, and that surely can't be canon to Vanguard zombies in the Dark Ether timeline. Butcher 2 was introduced from World War II, so I wonder if they are also going to retcon World War II zombies to fit into the Dark Ether storyline, and people like Barbarossa could end up just being someone who bonded with a Dark Ether entity, his sword being an artifact, and the God King could be an Elder God. But yeah, at this moment in time, it's unclear as to just how much is canon. Maybe they'll just be crossover characters and nothing more, and World War II zombies isn't indeed canon. With that said, that's everything we know about Vanguard zombies thus far.